Okay, so back when the first trailer for Argyle came out, I made this video about how I felt like hope was on the horizon, something to cut through the crap we've been force-fed lately, along with a possible mystery about Taylor Swift's involvement. Short version, even if she was involved, it would be probably smart for her to continue to deny having anything to do with it.
Yeah, the tomatoes aren't looking so good.
And we know how we feel about the tomatoes, but it is a metric nonetheless. Crafted by Matthew Vaughn, the brains and heart behind the Kingsman trilogy, Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Argyle features a shockingly impressive cast, including Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Bryan Cranston, Samuel L. Jackson, and Henry Cavill.
John Cena, Dua Lipa.
Because we've been burned in the past, normally a trailer alone would not be enough to get me to make a video about it, but what they promised really had me all amped up for a fun, exciting action comedy.
If there's one thing Hollywood has forgotten, it's fun.
Right you are, Doge. They couldn't even make a fun indie film. This would be a fun indie film. But instead of a fun action adventure like the first Kingsman movie, we got a tediously convoluted and jumbled mishmash.
And it was so long.
That's what she said.
That's my joke. Damn it, Dwight.
2 hours and 20 minutes is a bit much for a film like this, not that editing would have helped much. But back to the plot. Bryce stars as Ellie Conway, the author of a series of spy novels featuring the exploits of one Agent Argyle. They went after Cavill for the role as he's one of the leading contenders for Bond, and they wanted to capitalize on that.
This movie isn't going to hurt his chances.
Agreed, but I think it's interesting, just as a side note, that I think the Bond people are wisely biding their time, waiting and watching, not just because of this movie, but Hollywood in general.
It's not exactly a welcoming environment for a character like him, is it?
No, it is not. Anyway, she's attacked on a train by actual bad guys, only to be saved by Sam Rockwell's character, Aiden. He puts on his exposition hat and tells her that what she writes in her books has this weird habit of coming true, and this evil entity known as Spectre, the division, that's right, is after her, and the only way to stop them is to get the key from the last Mission Impossible movie.
That actually might have made things more interesting.
Right? It's just a standard issue MacGuffin, just a regular key. So after doing more Bond stuff, like traveling around to random exotic locations, it's eventually revealed that the real Argyle is Ellie herself.
I was afraid it was going to be the cat.
That actually could have been more interesting too. So after all this build-up, I wouldn't even classify this as a twist, as it's practically given away at the beginning of the movie when she reveals that she once suffered a head injury, not to mention that she keeps seeing Henry Cavill popping in as Aiden fights, which signals to the audience that we've got ourselves an unreliable narrator. So Hollywood, if you're going to have twists in a movie, there should be like no more than 2. Ideally 1, and really make it count like The Sixth Sense. But the twists got so constant and gratuitous that I not only lost count, but it kind of numbed me in what little emotional investment I had left.
Emotional damage!
Right you are, he. I'll get to the bizarre post-credit scene in a moment, but first I want to address what was probably the most disappointing aspect of the film, other than the fact that we know Matthew Vaughn is more talented than this, but that the issue is that it just felt like another vehicle for the message, but done in a much more clever, less obvious way. Here's what I mean. I was in radio for 20 years, so I'm no stranger to watching corporations contort themselves into knots to chase a female audience.
Why's that?
Well, you see, back then studies showed that women were the primary spenders in a household, so of course, bean counters are all about chasing that demographic to get that green moolah. Who says moolah anymore?
Your mom.
It's not a thing. Did you write this?
Eat me.
God.
Oh my God.
So if male demographics were taboo, these suits would do things like create hard rock stations for a female audience?
Right. Creating content for an audience that literally doesn't exist and pushing away the audience that does exist. That's kind of the bedrock of KK's failure. She's the poster child of this. But here's where it starts to get really interesting. Since my time in radio, new studies have come out that paint a more dire picture. In the interest of staying ahead of trends and making recommendations to their investors based on those trends, Morgan Stanley released research stats that a whopping 45% of women in the U.S. would be single by 2030.
It's only 6 years away.
Right you are, my mathematical canine friend. Here's a graph of that as well. Single women are expected to grow 1.2% annually from 2018 to 2030, compared with 0.8% for the overall U.S. population. The gold line is the female population, and the dramatic blue one is the number that will be alone. So the company uses this data to recommend investments to their customers, and it makes sense to invest in things like wineries, meal kits delivered to your door, companies that provide pet supplies.
So Ellie's writer persona is a textbook representative of this demographic?
Exactly, and here's another piece of evidence that shows that this trend has been going on for a while. Back in the 70s and 80s, we had shows like Full House, Family Matters, Family Ties, All in the Family, Home Improvement. And now, instead of family-centric shows, our streaming services are bursting with content filled with single females complaining about how hard dating is and how lonely they are.
Even the superhero ones.
Okay, so back to our bloated $200 million movie. With the exception of Sam Rockwell, the stellar cast is largely wasted, especially Cavill, who apparently is just in the film long enough to bait and switch the audience into thinking he and Dua Lipa are in the whole movie.
Except he shows up at the end as a real person.
One of the dozens of twists. What's going on? I don't care. They made me stop caring. Why? Why would you do that? Why? You're just doing stupid shit now. And then the post-credit scene reveals that this is taking place in the Kingsman universe?
But Sam Jackson was the bad guy in the first movie.
Don't you get it? This means it's a Kingsman multiverse.
I'm out.